Right now, we are joined by Claire Sateau from CAFTA. Claire, how are you doing today?
Very good, thank you.
Well, last week was a big week for trade. So there was all the remaining countries that are still interested in TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, got together in a great spot. Chile, who doesn't like to go to, or as Chile is the proper way probably to say it. So what was the purpose of this meeting in Chile?
I think a number of things were on the agenda, including the TPP agreement, WTO discussions, amongst other things. And our interest really was particularly focused on the TPP discussions. As you mentioned, ministers from the TPP signatory countries, all those that remain willing partners, met to discuss progressing liberalized trade at the Chile meetings. And for the Canadian export-oriented agriculture sector, it's quite an encouraging sign because my understanding is that the discussions showed a willingness to continue to envision what could happen of the TPP now that the U.S. has withdrawn. I think it's way too early to tell what can indeed happen, but the fact that all TPP ministers from those willing countries met really sends a positive signal to the importance not only of keeping borders and seeing what really can be done with the TPP and all the years of work that have gone into it.
Now, there were some other invited guests as well. South Korea and China were also in attendance, who were not a part of the original TPP agreement. What was the purpose of their participation?
I think some of these countries were also invited because not only have they expressed interest in joining the TPP discussion, South Korea, even before the TPP concluded in Atlanta last October, attending some of the rounds, the negotiating rounds. Other countries, including Indonesia, the Philippines, have also expressed interest. So I think this really was to look at what can be done to some extent with the broader Asia-Pacific region.
Yeah, so is Canada's kind of, I'm not sure, changed its mind, but, at one point it was sort of like, let's see what happens in the U.S. election. We'll either be in TPP or we won't, depending on what the U.S. does. And clearly Canada's sort of, I think, taking a bit of a different tack now, where this looks, with the U.S. out of TPP, Donald Trump coming through with his, he said he was going to pull out, and he did. This is obviously now with the countries that are left involved. This is quite a possible trade diversification strategy for Canada.
First, I'm not sure that Canada said that they will decide after seeing what the U.S. will do. I think Canada has always commented that they will consult Canadians on the deal, which they've done for some time. And what we are hearing lately is our new trade minister, really sending the right signals in terms of the fact that we need to continue to diversify. He's commented on the importance of the Japanese market, of the Chinese market, and rightfully so. Japan is really the big prize for us in the TPP. Japan has already ratified the agreement and encouraged other TPP countries to do so as well, to send a strong message. And it's certainly important for Canada to be at the table when Japan is there as well. I think overall, the fact that all these TPP ministers are getting together and talking, and I'm not sure if you've seen their statement coming out of the talks in Chile last week, but they've instructed their negotiators to meet to find a path forward with respect to implementing the key elements of the TPP agreement. I think the question on everybody's mind after the U.S. announced their withdrawal was, how are we going to achieve the benefits of the TPP? The TPP really is a deal that has high principles, high standards, rules of trade, strong rules of trade, and really for us was providing an opportunity to create a level playing field. So all of these signals coming out of the trade minister's office and the statement from all the TPP ministers is quite important. And overall, a way to summarize it, I think, is it shows somewhat of a reluctance to scrap the deal entirely.
Yeah, that is encouraging. And, Canada is clearly has been it's been many years here at work trying to put this all together, just like CETA was. Right now in the news in Canada, we're sort of getting a little bit of, we're hearing a lot out of some of the conservative candidates, such as, Maxime Bernier wanting to scrap supply management. The supply management has held trade deals back. With CAFTA, has that been your experience, or can you comment on that? Has our ability to close trade deals like TPP or CETA, has it been held up by our supply management system in Canada?
I really can't comment on those who we don't represent. So we represent those that rely on trade in agriculture. That's all the major trade-dependent commodities. The way I characterize it is all of agriculture but the supply-managed commodities. What I can tell you, though, is agriculture has always been a very sensitive topic in all trade negotiations, whether CETA, TPP, NAFTA, but it's not the only sector that is sensitive. There are others as well, and that's why for us, while it is a sensitive topic at times, it really remains essential that our ministers and our government does everything it can to level the playing field and seek competitive access to key markets abroad. Okay,
so we've sort of exhausted TPP. Is there an update on CETA? Where is that? It's obviously it's clearly a great deal for Canada from the standpoint of the U.S. is struggling to get a deal with the EU. Some think it'll never happen. Canada has an agreement. It's called CETA. What's an update on that deal closing?
So an update on that deal, Europe last month, the European Parliament voted on the CETA agreement and ratified the agreement in Europe. Now the deal needs to be ratified in Canada as well. The House voted on it earlier I believe it's this last month as well. And currently it is going through the Senate. I'm not sure when the Senate will vote on it, but the Trade Committee of the Senate is currently looking at it. So my understanding is that the target for implementation is sometime this spring. CAFTA has, from the very beginning, been a champion of this agreement, as it's expected to result in significant benefits for our ag exporters. But as we are getting closer to implementation, we're seeing that a number of technical issues remain outstanding, and these are in the areas of the timely approval of biotechnology trait and crop input products, as well as the approval of meat processing systems. So it's really important that these issues are resolved so that our exporters get the real commercial access that was promised. The day the agreement will be implemented, tariffs will come down, but it doesn't mean that the non-tariff barriers will be addressed. So it's really important that they be addressed very soon.
Yeah, that's the meat and potatoes of it is really a lot of those technical components, right? Because it's one thing to say, hey, come in, the water is warm, let's do some business. But then the technicals are kind of that but, right? If the technicals aren't friendly, then the agreement's not really worth the paper it's written on.
And that's the problem, and that's why increasingly free trade agreements are including elements to address those non-tariff barriers, and the TPP has a number of mechanisms to do so. In our experience, we see when free trade agreements are implemented, tariffs come down, but immediately after, non-tariff barriers come up. So we absolutely need to address that. For some sectors, non-tariff barriers are even more important than tariffs themselves.
Yeah, okay. Before I let you go, I have to ask you about CAFTA's feelings about the potential NAFTA renegotiation. How are your members sitting with, are they worried about what could come out of this renegotiation with NAFTA, or is it just too early to tell at this point?
I think it's too early to tell at this point. There are certainly a number of questions. The U.S. remains our largest trading partner. It absorbs 52% of our exports. We understand that the government is open to renegotiating the agreement. There can be ways it can be improved. I think we continue to work with our government to ensure that legislators on both sides of the border understand that a number of jobs, both in Canada and the U.S., rely on agriculture trade between our two countries. You know,
what I kind of thought was what I found sort of interesting as all of this NAFTA renegotiation talk's been going on is that on both sides of the border, the agricultural groups, they all sort of are saying the same thing outside of dairy. Let's push dairy aside for a second. The GFO is meeting with the national corn growers at the Commodity Classic. I was at NCBA where CCA and NCBA got together and talked. Everybody seems to be talking the same message and making sure that agricultural trade continues, whatever happens in this renegotiation.
I think it's in part because groups recognize that there is the North American market and the U.S.-Canada ag trade relationship in particular is very integrated. So a lot of commonality, a lot of common interests.
Well, and
products will cross the border many times before they end up on our plates.
Yeah, and there's I think a fear that people recognize that sometimes agriculture is what gets traded from a standpoint of concessions, and so NAFTA has been very good for agriculture. Other industries may think differently, but from an ag perspective, NAFTA has been very kind to agriculture.
That's correct.
Okay, Claire. Well, it was great talking to you, and I appreciate you joining us here on Real Agriculture, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.